Hey there, welcome to episode 104, the end of season 1 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at 11:25 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here in Greater Vegas. On this Wednesday, November 5, 2025. We publish on Wednesdays, so pretty close. Episode 104. Time flies. Today's title and topic, Systems. If you're not familiar with the Quaggling Sand audio program, it's basically a monologue, a audio essay collection, tales, recollections, stories, things you might find interesting or informative, or maybe not. I don't imagine there will ever be a guest on this program, but suffice to say there has not been in any of the 104 episodes. Don't forget episode 0. So here we are, Quaggling Sand, another season coming to an end. Season 2 begins next week. What will it hold? Who can say? Hopefully wherever you found... Oh, by the way, Quaggling Sand is a technical term. I remind people of this every week, but if you're new here, it's a technical term I coined when I was very young. It's probably something you've come to know as pins and needles. It's the return of circulation to what is probably a limb, a hand, a foot, maybe an arm or a leg. When you've slept on it, sat funny, goes numb. As the circulation returns, Quaggling Sand. Think about it. You know it's true. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a summary, which I'll read to you. I think it's one sentence, yeah. And then a couple of links, the 2 normal links. We're down to 2 for the weekly. And then 2 links related to today's episode. Systems. The summary is as follows. Way back in episode 17 of this very audio program, which I did not make clear, way back in episode 17, I talked about building things. Today, as we end season 1 and jump next week into season 2, is a great day to talk about systems. That is a self-serving summary if I've ever heard one. The links for today's episode, the usual Quaggling Sand homepage, quagglingsand.com. Still an ugly website. My to-do list is getting in the way of everything. Quaggling Sand, QUOGGLINGSAND, just like it sounds. quagglingsand.com, the homepage, the primary point of publication eventually of this audio program. It will still be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Amazon Podcasts and YouTube and maybe iHeartRadio or something, especially via an RSS feed, so you can decide what you listen with and on. I think we're also in the Podcast Index, which is a website platform tool thingy that the founder of podcasting, the podfather, Adam Curry, former MTV VJ, co-host of the No Agenda podcast, I think, still going. I think we're in the Podcast Index, so we might start linking to that instead of talking about Spotify profile pages and whatnot. Anyway, the profile page linking everything. I almost forgot. That's where that link would go. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. You will find my freeform profile page there. You don't have to spend any money, but you can, of course, support the various efforts with a coffee purchase there. Or you can follow some of the affiliate links that are lower in the profile page, things that I actually use, including my favorite coffee beans, some of them, and just some other stuff. There are links to all of my audio programming. There's also some links to the projects I'm working on. There's a little bit of biographical information at the top. And don't forget to buy me an update audio program, which is published first on buymeacoffee.com/danhugo/posts every Monday morning. And then it's available in all the other usual places. All those links are on there at buymeacoffee.com/danhugo. Again, no obligation to spend money. Everything I do is powered by coffee, though, so keep that in mind. Systems, the titular topic. The Wikipedia page for systems will tell you, or system, will describe in general terms what a system is. It's basically the interaction of things and other things. You can look into, from that page, you can find more information about system engineering, other system types, and so on. So it's a fairly broad topic. I've also included a Wikipedia page link for Laplace transforms. This is not really material. You are not required to click on that link, nor will you be tested on any of that material. But I do refer to Laplace transforms in this episode as I've written it. So if you're curious, Laplace transforms. So what is a system anyway? The Wikipedia page starts off with a reasonable definition. I would say that a system is a collection of things working together. The important thing, the thing that makes the whole notion interesting, to me at least, is the list of possibilities encountered with the things working together, or when the things working together do not. Let me fix that. I wrote with, it should be when they do not work together. That is to say, we often do not need to concern ourselves with the interconnectedness of the various services and processes on which we depend. They just work, capital J, capital W, maybe air quotes, and we focus on our own stuff. We go about our business every day. When one piece of some system somewhere that may itself impact some other system that is a specifically important thing or even critical thing closer to home, I really need that thing to work. Suddenly, how this stuff works becomes much more interesting when a part of it stops working. So some distant thing somewhere can let you down because a thing that you depend on depends on that thing, or maybe two other things. Who knows? It is when the things stop working, or stop working the way that we usually have come to understand that they work, the way that they usually have worked, that life can get tricky. Anything from paying a bill with money that did not transfer to taking a flight around the world without air traffic control. The interconnectedness that was may not be, and that could be bad. That is, the interconnectedness may not be interconnected, and that could be bad. That looks more obvious in writing. So let's talk stems and big stems first. I have mentioned college a few times through my episode history. Harvey Mudd College, in fact. I graduated a long time ago. Engineering degree. The majority of my class of 93, in fact, and most classes were there around the time, I don't know if this is still true, were there for an engineering degree like myself, but everybody took the entry-level systems engineering course. I honestly can't remember if it was E94 and E96 were like chemical and electrical or something, but that's later. Everybody had to take systems. Which meant every chemist and physicist and biologist knew a little something about Laplace transforms and transfer functions, the basis of system modeling, and some control theory. So I referred to Laplace transforms there very briefly. In a nutshell, it converts integration and differentiation into multiplication and division, which makes operating on transfer functions and control systems that are normally in the time domain, it moves them into the frequency domain for modeling and analysis. See, now don't you want to click on that Laplace transform link and find out more? For engineering majors like myself, there was the classic 101 course as well. We called it Big Stems, so baby stems and big stems for some, which was a whole year of system modeling, control theory, and advanced tools and methods for analyzing and modeling and characterizing and maybe even understanding systems. Want to know all the theory and math behind your oven temperature controller or your home thermostat works? Those are essentially the same thing. That was actually in that introductory class, believe it or not, so everybody got to learn that. But we got even more of that. Aircraft controls, how about state space? Observable, controllable, time invariant. The list of things goes on that we got crammed into our eager brains at the time. This was not the actual way systems work. The thermostat stuff is a practical learning example, but really these classes were learning how to learn about systems and how systems work, using tools and methods, the math, the science, the thought process, with the actual systems we encounter that we would encounter in our academic career and then after in our careers and our travels day to day. We're left to other classes or real life. And what's the difference really? Real life engagement, or in some cases, are not really within the system sphere, but are still system-ish. Think internet and web services and all of these sorts of things. So you would not use a Laplace transform per se to model how your bank interacts with Amazon. That system. Not yet anyway, but still a system. So application of all these learnings, we learned all about how Bode plots for phase and gain function, root locus for stability, finding the poles and zeros, and of course control systems using the proportional, integral, and derivative elements in combination to achieve some system behaviors. Control systems are everywhere. Think that thermostat example. We know our set point. We want it to be 325, hopefully that's your oven and not your home thermostat. You want to keep your home at like 75, 78, 79 Fahrenheit, somewhere in there. You want to cook your pizza at 450 Fahrenheit, maybe. So that's your set point. That's the temperature we want to maintain. We know the current temperature, Your cold oven is room temperature. Maybe it's 70, maybe it's whatever your home thermostat is set to. So the air inside your oven is probably the same as the room temperature in general. So say 75, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So that difference, and then your home might be 80, but you want it to be 75. So the difference between what it is and what you want it to be, it's called the error signal, the difference between those two temperatures or whatever you're trying to control. And we can toggle a heating element on and off, for example. Hopefully your home has some sort of a cooling element as well. Not everybody does. With a little bit of math, using Laplace transforms and transfer functions, we can control temperature pretty well. Well enough for boiling water anyway. We can hit 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius pretty easily. How fast do we approach that temperature? You can actually control that too. The more complicated our sensors and control elements, a variable heat input, for example, not just on and off, maybe a variable cooling element, a fan or liquid cooling system, the more closely we can control that error and maintain our set point. This is basically how all of this works. Proportional, integral, and derivative help to maintain the error, the total error, the error change rate, and the offset error. So you can tune your PID parameters and you can adjust how quickly your measured temperature approaches the set point temperature, how you maintain its small error over time. It might be like, oh, I set it to 75 and it's 77. That's a 2-degree error in steady state. So you can adjust for that and so on and so on and so on. That's how systems work. This is one very simple example. You can get as complicated as you want. If you are ever driving a vehicle, even a bicycle, and you feel a shimmy sometimes, you can correlate that rotation of the wheels, for example, with you can correlate the shimmy with the rotation of the wheels. Maybe when I'm going 88 miles per hour, I suddenly jump through time. But when your wheels start to vibrate, maybe the steering wheel shakes a little bit, but only at a certain speed, only at a certain speedometer indicated speed. Well, that's the rotation of your wheels on the road. It's the rotation of your axles, maybe your transmission. All these systems are rotating and moving, and they'll have a certain frequency of rotation or movement. And that's usually where you'll start to see some system resonance. Things will start to vibrate. And resonance is where vibration is maximal because resistance to that vibration is minimal. And you can see those on a Bode plot. It's one of the reasons those are in the engineer's toolbox. So you can start looking at things like, well, what's happening when I'm going that particular speed? And that way when you go to a mechanic or you try to examine it yourself, you'll say, oh, okay, it only happens at that speed. So if the mechanic only checks it at 10 miles per hour and says, oh, that doesn't work, there's no vibration, you could say, oh, no, the resonance is happening at 88 miles per hour or whatever. If you play music in your home or your car and something vibrates at some low frequencies, usually, it could be higher frequencies as well, harmonics. It's a similar challenge, similar solution. You're basically, the thing that vibrates at a particular frequency, you have found its resonant frequency. If you think about how tuning forks work, if you think about how actually all musical instruments work, but a string instrument, when you pluck the string, it will vibrate at its resonance frequency. And then it will, if your cabinet, if the case of your guitar, your violin, if the thing that is vibrating in sympathetic vibration, if there are sympathetic vibrations that can enter the cabinet or the air column or the air volume, you will get resonant frequencies at the harmonics as well. So then you'll get those rich tones. These are all systems. These are components of systems, and understanding how those systems work is handy. A lot of local system stuff revolves around, well, things revolving or moving or vibrating, or maybe heating or cooling, which is just another type of vibration anyway. Recognizing and understanding a local system is not really too difficult. Some intuition is sometimes enough, or at least a good start. A little bit of understanding about how systems work in general. Maybe you've considered the interconnectedness of all things, and then some math and practicality for more complete comprehension. If you knew for a fact why your oven was not holding temperature, you might say, oh, maybe the PID controller is up. Maybe the P coefficient is wrong. Maybe the integral term is Maybe we don't even have an I. Maybe we just have a proportional derivative controller. Not uncommon. So then there's a little steady state error. That's what the I would do, is account for it. What it does is it integrates the error integral. It adds up the error over time and then applies a correction in the other direction to try to keep it at your set point. So there you go. When you start to look at things that way, you start to say, oh, okay, well, maybe it's a specific element of this overall system that I should be taking a look at, or taking it in for service, if you like, and you'll know what questions to ask and what answers to give. Local systems are interesting, of course, and from a practical sense, knowing how systems function in this context, totally useful. The examples I've given here barely scratch the surface. Understanding systems, their observable properties, and how to affect them, if they're controllable, is like a tool in a Swiss Army knife. They're good to have on you. Not that you must know how to repair everything. That's a different set of skills. But knowing what to look for and how is a great start. When I was, what was I? I think I must have been 17 or something. I had my Volkswagen Bug. We had the new 1835 engine. No, wait, this was before that. This was the old stock engine, the 1594, I think it is. 1594, 93, whatever the displacement is of the stock VW engine from 1970 in a Bug, Type 1. The mechanic down the street, he lived down the street from my parents. They had a shop. They worked on Volkswagens. That's where we got it from. I went into their shop one day and I said, hey, maybe this was the new engine. I think we put the old shroud around everything. Is that possible? Probably. Anyway, I went in there and I said, hey, I'm driving around and it sounds like sheet metal is grinding, or something weird is happening. So one of the mechanics got in the car and we drove up and down the street for a while, and he pulled on the shroud and the other metal, the sheet metal that was around the engine and so on. He said, wait, let's go for another ride real quick. We did that and then we came back, and then he was sitting back there with the engine running, and he pulled on the throttle controller and gassed it up a little bit. And we could hear the sound. It literally sounded like sheet metal vibrating, or maybe if you've ever cut anything, especially metal, with a saw, that it's a hard sound to miss. He said, oh, okay, I know what this is. This is your engine is pinging. So if you've ever heard of engine pinging or knocking, pinging is pre-ignition and knocking is post-ignition, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a while since I've worked on an engine of any kind. So pinging makes this metallic noise, and knocking makes a knocking noise. So pinging was taking place, and I didn't even know what to look for. So once we went through timing, ignition timing, and mixture to make sure everything was correctly balanced, the system, the internal combustion engine, which is itself a learning experience if you're interested in systems. Once the system was in alignment, everything was adjusted properly. Oh, no more pinging. So that was pretty cool. That was a case where I didn't know, not only did I not know what I was witnessing, what I was hearing, but I didn't even know what to really measure or how to affect some sort of a change, because I didn't know what I was looking for. So that was a tremendous learning experience, and a lesson in general about how you can understand a system. You can think you understand a system. Once you understand the system, actually fixing it may require a little bit of extra specific learning. Today's engines, I wouldn't even begin to know where to look. Look at the ODB2 port, the one under your steering wheel that everybody plugs into because nobody needs to know how anything works anymore. The engine will tell you. Anyway, what about big systems? Now, local systems, that's like a small system, right? Knowing how your oven temperature controller works, how a yo-yo works, how a lock on your door works, things like this. These are simple systems. They're local. They don't really interact with the rest of the world so much. My minor concentration in college was economics, which goes well within the engineering space, right? How to make things and then how to pay for them. Though I have also come to realize over the years just how important history is to both of those, though I don't know that I even subscribe to the history rhymes notion that George Lucas was famously, he said it on camera. So how he wrote his various movies and why everything seems to take place in all of the movies. Oh, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Maybe. Still, history is important, and ultimately a system itself, which intermingles with economics and engineering, is swirling around all of this to try to accomplish various things with whatever is at hand and some understanding of how these can all come together. Hey, you thought engineering was just applied science? Well, you are incorrect. Nowadays, the systems we interact with are not only global, but extra global, since we depend on quite a bit on satellites in Earth orbit for weather data and communications and who knows what else. And then some things are happening in higher altitudes, perhaps. I don't think we don't, most people don't depend on shortwave, but yeah, who knows? Since we depend quite a bit on satellites in Earth orbit for weather data and communications, we should kind of know how they work, right? I don't know if you do. Where did the audio file you're listening to right now come from? How did it reach you? Data communication network, supply chains, and of course the various services and production resources that are at the interconnected nodes. How does money move around? Why does it sometimes not? Even if you have some, how come it didn't land where you try to send it? How is your breakfast cereal made, and where do its ingredients and packaging materials come from? And how are they all assembled to reach your store shelves? Who knows? It's a lot of stuff going on. So local systems are interesting, but global systems, things that are connected via roadways, rail, radio waves, microwaves, the internet, these are things that are happening somewhere behind the scenes and they don't always make sense. The digital world is particularly important because these systems can change quickly, sometimes behind the scenes. Have you ever gotten an update you didn't know about? Oh, everything's different now. And you may not even know how, say, your personal information is compromised, or slightly less dire, how the services you may depend on and the apps you have installed on your mobile device or your computer or your laptop or whatever could introduce some of their own issues due to the way they are interconnected somewhere in the cloud. As I am recording this, we are a week or so after the failure of many services based on AWS, Amazon Web Services, the US East 1 region, which had a cascading failure due to a DynamoDB, Dynamo database, DNS, domain name service, record update, workflow failure. Two pieces of software that were designed to work together that did not communicate with each other properly. So the one that was in charge of writing the DNS record updates that it received from the other one, that didn't work properly. So it zeroed out a DNS record. So that made the first piece of software stop telling the second piece of software to update it because it wasn't there anymore. And that led to DynamoDB failing, which led to countless services that you may have needed, even depended upon, to go offline or become otherwise unusable or inoperable because they too depended on some DynamoDB related service. To you, a complex system beyond comprehension. Who knows? That just stopped working. And you have no way of even examining what's going on. To those closer to the problem, a complicated system failure that really should have been avoided, should have been found in testing. Hopefully a lesson learned, but I'm going to suggest probably not. So I was a QA tester once upon a time. I graduated from college into the Bush recession, Bush 41, George H.W. Bush, before Al Gore had a chance to invent the internet. So while I did have an opportunity to move to Silicon Valley and place my early career wager on what would become the dot-com boom, it started off with some jobs that were often looked down upon, believe it or not. The tester or QA tester, quality assurance. The people, I wrote how. The people who, sometimes my fingers don't know, they don't talk to each other. Even now. The people who are sometimes barely skilled, like technical skill or whatnot, but they're like normal people, just like the intended customer or user of the thing. They're barely skilled in relevant technology, for example, who are paid to try out products while they are in development, filing what we call bugs along the way so that they can be fixed or deferred or closed without fixing, which is annoying, and so on. So there's a whole process. Often there is a little bit of disrespect in calling someone just a tester. I definitely felt that in those early years, and I was called that, oh, you're a tester. Oh, you're just a tester. However, it turns out QA testers are advocating for the eventual users of the product or service, and what they find ultimately makes the company or entity making the product or service better for delivering better to their customers and users. You would think somebody would get that at some point. Oh yeah, that's right. You do make our stuff better by using it before it gets out. Have you ever been preparing food and you taste it in the kitchen before you serve it to your guests or whoever's eating? That's QA. That's testing. I've learned over the years that people in the business of making and building whatever who do not understand that, and they do exist. I have encountered them. I've even worked with them now and then, here in Vegas even. They are profoundly ignorant. And with any luck, that will catch up with them without others getting hurt. Knowing how things work before you turn them loose on your customers and users is really critical and often undervalued internally and maybe in general. But your customers and users will let you know when you let them down. Oh, yes, they will. The internet is there for them. More importantly, though, the thing I learned early on was that going through a couple of years as a QA tester right out of college, right? Oh, we can't hire you. You don't have experience. Just go be a tester. Guess what kind of experience I was getting? It enabled me to apply some of my systems thinking to understand causality, to understand unintended consequences, unexpected and sporadic behaviors, correlating one thing with another. That may or may not imply causality. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the expression is correlation does not imply causation. Causality, causation, basically the same. I can't imagine they're not. And don't get me started on accessibility testing. And that you can also make things more usable and even better documented. So accessibility, usability, clear and usable documentation, so your customer, your users know how things are supposed to work. Later, as the job market opened up, the true Silicon Valley chaos unrolled. Things were really hopping, probably around 96. And getting jobs and engineering roles became easier. I was able to apply what I had learned from the whole system viewpoint in QA to development of a component piece of the system in my development engineering roles. Believe it or not, people in development roles making the tech and the tech adjacent things we use and depend on daily often do not know how the entire system works, focusing their time and energy on their part of it. This is crazy, but often true, and it is the people testing and validating the products and services who actually learn the ins and outs of the entire system itself, who actually care about those outcomes. This is a longer story, but trust me, most people in QA treat every finding as a personal accomplishment and every unfixed bug that is allowed to go out into the world an insult to them personally. I kid you not. Testers are often undervalued, the voice of experience. So here in modernity, as I record this, we are all experiencing some interesting times, to say the least, where global economies and supply chains and food supplies and a host of other moving parts are all having some impact on everybody, just about everywhere to some degree, whether they're working or not. Some days are good, some days not. How often do we need to learn that supply-side economics only benefit the few? Well, one more time at least, apparently. Economics and general interaction at a global scale is interesting, even fascinating, surely educational, though it is unfortunate that we need to learn through practical and possibly painful application that these are still true. Will we learn? Well, that is another one that requires a few more times in the future. It's the way it goes. Everything is complicated, maybe more than needed, but who can really say? And for people doing their thing without the time or wherewithal to deep dive into learning how things really work, I don't mean in a conspiracy theory way. I mean just learning the ins and outs, like the real, how does your electric car really work? Do you know? More and more things around us appear complex, that is, beyond our own comprehension. Complex systems don't always have a complete set of known inputs or a completely correlated and well understood set of outputs for a given set of inputs. They're generally not easy to understand. But for people who are in that business, who take the time, they are not beyond comprehension. They build them. That's their business. So they're complicated, but not complex. Why did the thing, whatever it is, stop working, and why did it start working again? Somewhere there is a complicated system of interactions that failed in some way, perhaps, but it is far too complex to the casual user, and if it starts working again, why worry about it anyway? So somebody somewhere, think electric lineman. It's a legacy title. Electric lineman for working for your local power company who gets the lights back on in a heavy rainstorm. You don't have to worry about why it works. It just does. Oh, the lights are back on. And someone out there is very wet and probably avoided getting electrocuted. For me, I find that looking locally is even more interesting because global supply chains and global economics and global whatever, global supply chains and global economies and global politics are all interesting and consequential and should be pondered toward understanding. We can spend some time and try not to get overwhelmed with the YouTube ridiculousness. Everybody has a channel and everybody has an opinion, and most of them are wrong. You and I are almost certainly not having any impact on any of those, unless you're like a super popular YouTuber or TikToker or something, maybe. So try to get it right. While we are most definitely feeling the impact of all of this, so we're kind of left to our own devices while somebody else is driving. Locally, though, you and I can make a real difference. You can take action, run for office, interact with those who have, and so on. They say politics is local, but that reality comes after our various systems being local and understanding them. We should know how things work. How do our streets get taken care of? How does our mail get delivered locally from local post offices? How does our local power work? How does our local water work? How we should understand them and how we can affect them. And from my perspective, this is a trend I have been following for as long as I can remember, to know how things around me work. So a lot of the things I'm working on right now are in that vein, especially when, as I realize more and more painfully, that a lot of people around me do not care. Or if they do care to become involved, it is for their own ends, not necessarily for the sake of understanding and elevating, perhaps. Lessons learned time and time again. Anyway, systems, this was sort of a generic, I didn't really talk about specific systems because there are too many. Thermostats are a really easy one. They're the example always given. You can look at spring damper and RCL circuits. RCL circuits are basically PID circuits. There's a proportional, integral, and derivative element in your resistor, capacitor, inductor circuit that is used in loudspeakers and crossovers. And there's an analog and driven damped harmonic oscillators, which usually have a spring and a damper and a moving mass. Sometimes you call that a car with a suspension system, or a loudspeaker, the moving part of a loudspeaker, or so many other things. So like I said earlier, things are often moving or vibrating or rotating. Those are systems, electrical systems as well, thermal, temperature control, the heating and cooling components. But as well, nowadays we have our digital communications, and we have interoperable and non-interoperable systems that are doing things for us and to us. And I think there's a substantial value in understanding not only how they work, but understanding as well when we don't know how they work, but that they can have severe negative impact on us when they stop. The Amazon Web Services example was one. There were countless examples of things that people don't even think about until they stop working. Like, I think one of them was that some sort of digital bed, a bed that you could adjust position or something, some configuration, required access to Amazon Web Services for whatever reason. So when those services became unavailable, the bed stopped working, so people couldn't lower the bed into a sleeping position or something silly like this. Why do you have to check with Amazon Web Services before you can go to sleep in a bed? Nobody will know. But it is important I think, to understand some of this stuff, at the very least, how things are interconnected and when something seems to not work, and it might be because of something very far away, well beyond your reach and control, possibly understanding. Anyway, systems are interesting. I wish more people would actually take the time. But if you don't want to, you can pay me. I'll do it. Thanks. No, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later for season 2 starting next week. Same bat channel, same bat time, all that stuff. Take care. Bye-bye.